Perfect. Thanks everyone for joining another AMA series. Today, I have someone who I've worked with for a long time, actually, probably several years now. Her
Yeah.
name is Lamar. Lamar is Lamar Nava. Lamar Nava is an experienced and data-driven B2B SaaS customer success leader. She started her career in agency recruiting, building out Betts Recruiting's New York office, and most recently transitioned into the customer success space, scaling Betts' first SaaS CS organization. Betts Recruiting has curated North America's leading go-to-market talent network, empowering the most innovative companies to scale efficiently. So that's Lamar. Like I said, I've worked with her on several occasions actually, and she's done a ton
Yeah.
of personal favors, professional favors on the recruiting side. It's been an amazing leader and team to work with, especially as I was trying to scale Twingate's first customer success, SDR, and sales team all at the same time. And so super grateful to her. Thanks, Lamar, for joining and for talking to our
Sure.
founders.
Of course. Yeah. I think it's been maybe four or 5 years that we've
Is
worked
it 4 or 5
together.
years? Okay, I
I
said
think
several
so.
because that might as well be 10 in like
Yeah, I know. So in
equity.
recruiting land, that's 30 years. So we've worked together for a while, and it's fun because we worked together both when you're at Twingate and then now on your own new venture. So this is really
Yeah, totally awesome. And I know I've spoken to you at length about the Zero to Hero community, but just as a
yeah,
recap, they're all 0 to 1 enterprise B2B SaaS founders. A lot
yep,
of these folks are learning sales for the first time.
sure,
Some have hundreds of thousands of dollars in ARR. Others, are just starting their pilots and trying to convert design partnerships. So
sure,
we'll focus kind of the conversation around topics that they'd be interested in. And I have a few questions to get us started. I guess
sure.
the first one is a question I get often from
Yeah,
founders is when should you even think about hiring your first seller? It's
right,
interesting because I have a boot camp where I teach founders how to sell themselves.
sure.
But oftentimes, to get to beyond like the first 10 to 20 customers, you need to hire someone. So when is your trigger point? Like, what do you all say at Bets?
Yeah.
What are you telling your founders, early stage founders?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you said the thing about, usually it takes you hiring a salesperson to get the 10 to 20, because that's usually our trigger point to hire someone is after you've already acquired about 10 to 20 customers. I
Yep.
think I wouldn't tell founders to get too nuanced in the specific number of customers, but the whole idea is that you have a reputable sales motion that you've acquired customers with and that someone can take over, right? Because I think expecting someone to come in and with zero to little, to no experience actually acquiring customers is going to be very hard for someone. So I
Mhm.
would say once you've hit about 10 customers, 10 to 20 customers, really depending on your sales motion, right? These numbers vary differently if you're looking at a transactional sale all the way up to an enterprise level sale. But usually we say about 10 to 20 customers is when you should start to look at hiring your first sales rep. And this is typically going to be like an account executive, right? I probably wouldn't recommend the first person you need to be an SDR or anybody on the post sale. We're talking someone that's going to come in, probably prospect their own pipeline and close business for you since there won't be an SDR function. But 10 to 20 customers is usually what we say. Usually at that point, like you're looking at potentially raising another round or you have really, really solidified your product market fit. But I think it could be a mistake to hire someone too early. And that's a big mistake that we see a lot of founders make is
Mm.
hiring someone too early when they really haven't figured out like who they're selling to. Like you don't have to have sold 50 customers, but you need to know who you're selling to and really have sold some reputable deals where you can then have someone else come in and really mimic that success. Would you say that's something that like you see too, Peter, is like 10 to
Yeah,
20? Or what do you think is
completely
that
agree.
sweet spot?
I think, yeah, like beyond 10 to 20 is basically where I see founders not be able to handle their own pipeline, right?
Right.
Because if you have 10 deals closed, you probably have like 30 to 40 prospects that you're talking to because your
Sure.
close rate's not going to be 100%, right? And,
Right.
these founders are also trying to lead product strategy. They're trying to source, for the next fundraising round. So there's way too much sales activity at that point to do alone. And then
Right.
on the other side, yeah, I would agree. If it's way too early, you have folks who are, trying to do market research when they should actually be doing sales, right?
Right.
Or they're
Exactly.
maybe trying to be a product marketer and creating the deck from scratch, which I
Right.
love doing, but
Sure.
a lot of career salespeople want to hit the ground running. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
The SDR thing is actually interesting because
Yeah.
it's pretty common that I get that as a statement almost before even
Mm,
asking me who to
mm,
hire. and they're like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm going to hire an SDR. So
First.
can you, yes, first, like,
Okay.
do you get that a lot too? And like, why not an SDR, right? Because you would think, I could see where these founders are coming from. They think, okay,
Sure.
I have the sales motion down. I've learned founder-led sales.
Right.
Now the bottleneck is leads. But
Okay.
I agree. It's from my perspective, I think it's a mistake to hire an SDR first.
Sure.
So tell me about kind of what you've seen there, and is that kind of a common assumption that founders come in with too?
Yeah. Well, I think for this whole call, it's really important as like a disclaimer that like not everything is going to fit to everybody's sales motion. And like
Yeah,
that's the
good point.
biggest takeaway that I would say. And
Yep.
that's why the benefit of working with you, if you've seen so many different sales motions, is everybody's situation is very different and everybody's
Sure.
in buyer is so different. So it really depends on the market that you're in, right? And so I've seen a lot of founders that have come in and hired an AE first because they didn't have pipeline problems. They had so many inbound leads coming in that they were simply in the best spot that everybody wishes they were in.
Yeah.
I have too many leads. I can't close them all myself. And so I need an AE. Great. Like who wouldn't want that job, right? And then I want them
Sure.
to build out process as well. In that case, obviously bring on an account executive and they can help create the process alongside you. Now, if you're having trouble getting leads in, yes, maybe an SDR would be the best fit, but if it's still a relatively small team, guys, SDRs are junior. Like they
Yeah.
don't know how to create process. They're not going to understand product market fit. They're not going to understand your ideal like end user. Like I think you need to figure that out first, and you can test it out maybe with some third party SDR resources or an intern or something, or like using AI to like do some of the sales motion, but. I
Yep.
don't know, and not for everyone, but I think there's some instances where definitely an SDR could be used, but definitely make sure you have product market fit before you're bringing in an SDR to do that, right? Because
Yep.
you're asking someone that's really junior in their career to figure it out. And that person doesn't have any sales experience. They have a year of SDR experience. So,
Totally.
but if
Yeah.
you feel like you figured that out, you feel like you have the motion down and you just need a body to like get calls and emails out there, yeah, absolutely. And that person could definitely grow with you to be an AE down the road, like maybe a junior AE or a mid-market AE or something like that and grow with the company. But typically we recommend an AE first.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing I see too is like a lot of these folks are very junior, maybe
Yeah.
straight out of college or 2 or 3 years out of college. I definitely didn't know what I was doing 2 or 3 years out of college. And
Oh,
I also needed management and support and
right.
mentorship. And a lot of these founders, I think you look at their calendar and there's not a lot of time
No.
for developing junior folks. They really
Right.
need specialists to hit the ground running, right? So
And
appreciate you
this is
weighing in on that.
And
Yeah.
this is something you and I have talked about, which I feel like we'll keep coming back to. And we've talked about before is this idea of like, well, what type of founder is it, right? Are we talking
Mhm.
a technical founder? Are we talking someone that has come from the revenue space that understand revenue motions? And that's where, again, it's not
Mm,
all the same exact thing. Like you
that's a
really
good
have to
point.
play to your strengths, right? So if you are someone that doesn't know revenue that well, bringing in an SDR is probably not your best bet because you're going to have to teach them, even if they're coming from an SDR role, you're going to have to teach them how to do sales versus if you're coming with a revenue background and you know revenue really well, then great. Like then you could probably bring someone in, you can teach them that quickly
Yeah.
and then they could run. So you have to really play to your strengths and understand like where do I fit in this whole life cycle?
That's a good point. Yeah, because mostly I'm dealing with technical founders. So that's a lens I come in through where,
Yeah,
they need to be able to learn sales themselves too.
right.
So being, a little bit removed from coaching and mentoring as like a specialist, that's really
Right.
difficult to do if you're dealing with
Yeah.
a junior employee. So super helpful. You touched on this, but let's go back to kind of what you said around the first hire being an AE and not going too senior, not hiring a head of sales. Can you
Yeah.
unpack that a little bit? Because I think that's a lot of the type of question I get with my founders too.
Right.
Because they're interfacing with me as a sales coach, they automatically think, okay, somebody with 15 years experience will be able
Sure.
to carry on and start to scale some of the frameworks I'm talking about. But that might not be the right approach, right? So can you kind of
Yeah,
tell me
definitely.
your experience there and what you've seen there?
I think it's a little tricky. Again, it depends on your sales motion. Typically, I always recommend an AE that's coming from your space that understands your sales motion. The reason why we don't go straight to head of sales, and you had mentioned something, a VP of sales. VP of sales, I mean, titles these days are, all over the place. But if you're pulling
Yep.
someone that's a traditional VP who's managed directors and hasn't been a frontline manager in a while, you're way too far off in the scale of what their actual responsibilities are going to be. Like, I don't
Yep.
care what they're telling you of what they want in their next move. Like they
Yeah.
haven't done it firsthand in a really long time. But at the same time, like, are they okay to go back into that grind and really scale it from the ground up? And how quickly I think if you really want to hire a VP of sales or a head of sales to be that first AE, the biggest thing I would recommend over even understanding their qualifications is understanding their motivations, right? Do they want to be do they want to be a hunter again? Do they want to
Mhm.
build their own pipeline again without a BDR support team? How
Mhm.
quickly do they want to move into managing reps, right? Because there's a lot of people I hear that say, I would take a step back to an AE role again, but I want to be managing reps in like 6 months to a year. Well, we don't know if that's for sure going to happen. So that
Yeah.
motivation is really important. I think if you have created a really, really strong pipeline and you have gotten your company pretty far revenue wise, like maybe over 1 million, you could potentially look at bringing a head of sales in. But I think having someone that's recently done it is going to be really important. And it all comes back to that motivation piece.
Yeah.
Definitely not a VP. But again, if maybe the VP was like a title that was not actually VP, like maybe you could look at that. And the
Sure.
and you also have to remember it's like why people are hired into head of sales or VP of sales roles. It's to scale, right? It's to really go from one number to the next and really be
Sure.
able to scale that growth. It's not to figure out product market fit. It's not to do a lot of these other things. That should ideally have been done prior to bringing in a head of sales or a VP of sales. And so it's, again, to what you talked about, it's that research component that like should probably be done by the current team versus having someone too senior come in. I think the one exception is if you know someone or if you've worked with someone, they really
Mm,
understand what they're getting into and they're willing to
totally.
put that effort in, sure. But normally I would say like a senior or a pretty, strategic account executive that's really working, like looking to get their hands dirty and build something out is probably your best bet. Not someone that's like only doing it for a little bit and hope that they can be in that head of sales or VP of sales role again.
Sure. Makes sense. I like that nuance where, you're uncovering it's not just the title, it's who they've managed and how many people they've managed and how far
Yeah.
away they've been from the action, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're a VP, there's definitely a lot of VPs out there who are managing two or three people who are
Sure.
frontline sellers. And in that world, they're probably actually selling directly too. So that
Absolutely.
could be an okay fit. So I think it's
Totally.
good for, founders to ask, who are you managing? How close are you to the actual deal cycles
Yeah.
and the process? Because that's very, very important. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift to this is super helpful. Let's shift to the actual process, right?
Yeah.
Because you and I have been through a couple different processes,
Yeah.
most recently Twingate, and
Mhm.
appreciate you supporting us through that process. And we could dig
Sure.
into it a little bit. But before we go there, like what are some, table stakes parts of the sales hiring process that founders need to be aware of?
Yeah.
And after you answer that, I'll ask also some mistakes you've seen founders make, because I'm sure you've seen a lot of kind of head scratching moments too.
Oh, so many. I always say recruiting should have its own reality TV show because what we hear is usually on the candidate side, super crazy.
I'm
Um,
sure.
so I
Yeah.
would say like the ultimate checklist for a founder looking to create their hiring playbook for sales always starts with having a really, really strong understanding of what you're looking for. Like, do not go and try to bring in an agency or bring in a recruiter if you do not know exactly what you need to be looking at, especially if you're coming from a technical background. That's where you lean on your support system, your advisors, Peter, someone to help you understand what actually are we looking for here. That's something that I've gone on so many kickoffs with founders or CROs and we sit down and we're like, okay, what are we looking for? And they simply don't really know. So then it's a
Wow.
month or 2 or 3 months of trying to figure it out. There's always going to be a figure out stage, right? Like as a good recruiter, I always like to put a couple different types of profiles in front of them that first week. And then we come
Hmm.
back and we say, hey, which one fit? Which one do you feel like would be the best?
Yeah.
But
I
you need to
remember
have a
that. That
really
was super helpful part of the process.
totally. And
Yeah.
maybe three of them we're going to reject, but at least then you know, like, okay, which you can see it all, right? Versus
Yep.
just only seeing one type of profile. So I think first doing your research on what are we looking for, and that really is sales motion specific. So the questions I like to ask are, okay, well, what are your sales motion, right? What's your average deal size? What's your average deal cycle? Who are you calling into? What is the quota going to be? All of those things that you're
Mhm.
expecting this person to have, or your sales motion. But also, what do you want this AE to be, right? So do you want the AE to have experience with complex deal sizes? Do you want them to have, more transactional? What type of quota do you want them to have being held to in the past? Are
Mhm.
departments important? Are our personas important? Like, how important is it that they're coming from your space? Do you want them to come from a competitor? Like, who are some people in your space? If you want them to come from a competitor, who are some people in your space that have, similar sales motions to you? You would be
Yep.
surprised when I ask, like, who's in your space that has a similar sales motion. Usually half the time I get blank stares, and that's fine. Like,
Wow.
I can figure it out. Like, I have enough tools that I can figure it out. But usually people should have an understanding of like who's in their market that they
Of
could
course.
potentially try to replicate. So that's
Yep.
where I would start. Like, what is my sales motion from those numbers specific? Then what am I looking for in my sales hire with that stuff? What type of sale do I want them to come from?
Mhm.
Personality wise, what are the intangibles that I'm looking for? And then also, like, what types of software, if it is a software sale, do I want them to come from? What if you don't need them to come from your space? Maybe you're creating a space and you don't have any competitors. Then what other types of software are adjacent enough in which they have
Mhm.
similar motions that could be helpful, right? And this goes into the mistake piece, but I often see people that say, well, I don't really want to spend a lot of time training them. So I want them to come from a company that has a really strong training program, right? I want them to come from an SAP, or I
Mm.
want them to come from a really big sales organization because I know they got really good training there. That's great, but you need to be prepared that their sales motion is going to be very different, right? Like,
Sure.
these people are going to have a list of leads that they're getting every morning and they're calling them down, right? And they have an entire BDR team. Like, that's very different. So really start thinking about, if you're coming up with a target list of companies that you want to go after, are what type of products are they selling, and is it need to have or nice to have, and what type of value are they really driving there, right? Because a lot of people are like, oh, get me someone from the Salesforce or these shiny companies, and the sales is so different. It's like, well, they're selling
Yeah.
Salesforce and you're selling a company that no one's ever heard before. Like, the sales process is going to be so different. So don't get blinded by the shiny logos when you're thinking about hiring sales reps, because really think about the sales motion and how similar it is to yours.
Sure, that's such great advice. Something I tell founders all the time. The other thing too is obviously Salesforce has a brand, startups
Sure.
don't, but the size of the company is also just completely different, right? So,
So different.
how do you think about that? Because for me, I feel like the cutoff even is 50 people. Like beyond
Oh
like
yeah.
50, 60, 70 people, the
Yep.
company starts to feel different. So when I'm talking
Absolutely.
to a founder who's at like 20 people, this AE is going to need to collaborate with the founder, obviously, the
Sure.
CTO, the CPO, probably support, and a bunch of executives within the company. So,
Sure.
yeah, do you agree with that? Like, how do you kind of advise on that? Because there's such a big gap, I feel like, depending on size of company and with
Sure.
regards to like culture and speed of operating.
Absolutely. That's so important. If you are, at a startup and you're looking to hire your first sales rep, you need to hire someone that has experience at a startup. And the disclaimer there is, are they either ideally coming from a startup, right, in a similar size, right, maybe under 50 or under 100, but also don't you can also look at someone who's done that in the past, right? Maybe not more than 5 years ago, but if
Hmm.
they, have been in a company for 2 years, but the 4 years before they were the first founding sales hire and they grew that motion, then great, that would work too. Because I don't want people to be too one-sided where they're only looking at people that are coming from startups under 50. Like, and you're looking at a certain type of company, you've limited your pool down to 3 people.
Yeah,
You tell
you're
your
looking
recruiter
for a
that, and they're going to be
unicorn.
like, oh gosh, here we go, So that can really limit your pool. So be open, right? If they have it in their background that's somewhat recent, I would also look at those profiles, but they need to have startup experience specifically. And one of the things that I think is really important as well is what a startup means to you, but also like within the sales motion, right? So there are startup companies that have BDRs, right? And so AEs are getting some of their leads from BDRs, or AEs, or maybe that startup has a really strong inbound funnel, right? But they're still deemed a startup, right? But you don't have any inbound and you don't have BDRs. So therefore, even though they're coming from a startup, their sales process is still very different. So those are
Hmm.
where their tier two nuanced questions come in on, really, what
Hmm.
is your sales process? Where are you getting your leads from?
Hmm.
What type of sale is it, right? Like, all of those things are really important, because you could say it's a lot of companies are startups, but that
Yeah,
startup could be, Sequoia's number one company, and they could have
sure.
a million leads coming in daily. Like, great. Well, that's going to be a little different than yours.
Yeah, I love that concept of tier two. What is it? Tier two questions? Is that what you're
Questioning.
saying?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Like it's a
So
little bit
important.
more under the hood, right? A little bit more nuance. That's
Yeah,
great because you're right. Like a startup could be the darling of Silicon Valley, and
sure.
they're getting inbound leads, up the wazoo. So that's great.
And
Tell me, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and a founding sales hire search is a very, very fun search, but it's also one of the most difficult. I
Yes.
would say, like, I'd love to hear other recruiters' opinions, but I do think finding the right founding sales hire can be more difficult than finding the right VP of sales or finding the right head of sales.
Hmm.
Right. Like that, it's so specific that you really need to be working with someone that has done this before and knows
Yeah.
exactly what they're looking for. And so, like, I know here we have 4 people on our team that only do those specific types of roles. You've worked with a
Wow.
couple of our team.
Yep.
And because that types of role is so, so different. So I think that's important, like who you're working with and that they've done that before. And then also, if you're looking at a profile, maybe they were at a startup, but then you see on their LinkedIn or their profile was a founding sales hire, like you can keyword search that. That's perfect, right? Again,
Hmm.
ask those tier 2 questioning. But if they've been a founding sales hire before, I think that's important. And I do want to say, I've heard a lot in the market talking about hiring in pairs for your first
Hmm.
role, of hiring 2 AEs at the same time, just to be able to compare like what's working and what's not working. I think it really, really depends on like how much you've done yourself, right? But I usually say start with one. But if you're in a
Yeah.
position where you think you can bring on 2 and you've already like scaled to 20, 30, 40 customers, then like I think you could try with 2 for sure. But that is a topic of interest right now where people are thinking like, do I want to start with 2 or do I want to start with 1? I'm kind of indifferent. I've always seen 1, but a
Yeah.
lot of people have seen a lot of benefit in 2. So it's something worth exploring.
That's super interesting. Yeah, I feel like at scale, maybe like it works, but
Sure.
in the early going, my opinion is that it creates a lot of management overhead, actually, and a lot
Absolutely.
of issues around ownership with the two
Sure.
AEs, right? Because they're
Right.
both going to be doing early stage
Founding.
company
Yeah.
building activities, right?
Sure.
So who do you go to for what? Who's like
Right.
building the deck? Of course, they could be doing it together, but I often find that there's analysis paralysis in those
Sure.
situations as well, right? So that is interesting that that's coming up as a topic. The
Yeah.
other thing I think, the reason why the founding sales hire is so hard is because there's a lot of interpersonal dynamics as
Mm.
well,
Yeah.
with the CEO, right? I
Sure.
think I read somewhere it's well known that firings happen because of interpersonal issues, rarely because of performance, actually. I don't know if
Sure.
you've heard this, um,
Yeah.
meaning that your emotions and your personalities have to mesh, right? So
Absolutely.
what are some of the things that you help founders think through when like looking at that more like culture, value specific, like disposition and personality of the
Sure.
salesperson and how they might work with like a technical founder, let's say?
I think situational based questions is really important in that case, right? Really
Yeah.
thinking of some questions that you can ask that put them on the spot and start to think about specific instances in which they were at,
Mm,
working with their manager or their CEO, things like that. And in my interviews, I mean, I'm not hiring a founding sales hire, but what I like to ask is, tell me what your ideal leadership style is, right? Tell me
mm,
about 3 managers that you've worked with. What was your
mm.
favorite one? You don't need to name names, but
Yeah.
who was your favorite one? And who were some leaders that you wish, your relationship could have improved? And what were the reasons why, right? There's no
Mm,
right answer, but then you can start to slot yourself into which of those leaders do I think I am. And I think a lot of times too, like founders, when they're hiring sales, they just want to pitch on like how great this opportunity is. And
yeah.
I think that's a huge mistake that people make, is not pitching enough. So I appreciate if you're out there pitching on the interviews, you need to be doing that. But at the end of the day, you need to be very, very honest with your management style, your, strengths, your weaknesses, because if you don't, like that's just a candidate waiting or employee waiting to leave, right? Like
Yeah.
you really need to be very, very transparent on some of the challenges that you've seen, your weaknesses as a leader, like your strengths as a leader, like your
Yeah.
personality type, right? Like what your expectations are of this person. Like, please be super, super honest, because that's the best way you're going to find someone, because this person's going to be in the trenches with you, right? Like, let's
Totally.
not make the trenches look like it's, sunny and green grass down there. Like, hey, we still
Yeah.
plant the green grass. Like, let's be exact about what we're actually looking for and what we think it's going to be like. Because I
That's a
think
good
too many
point.
people have like happy ears and they come
Yes.
out and they're like, oh my God, I'm gonna be this founding sales role. I'm gonna be able to build this. It's gonna be so amazing. And then I'm like, well, have you asked about all the nitty gritty? Like, why have their deals not, closed in the past? Or what have been some issues that they face? And they're like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's also important for retention too, right? Do you want
Sure.
a founding salesperson to stick around for a couple of years, or are they going to be
Right.
gone in 4 months because you sold them the dream that isn't the
Right.
reality, right?
Yeah.
So,
But at the same time, like, don't, I want to make sure there's a balance, right? You do
yeah,
want to sell
yeah,
them the dream of like, if we can do this together and you know what I'm like,
right.
I know what you're like, and we do this together, like, let's go do this thing. But like, you need to be able to be transparent about the pros and the cons.
Yeah, it's so funny how similar this is to enterprise sales, actually. It's the
Mhm.
same thing I tell founders when they're selling deals. Like, don't
Yeah,
oversell the roadmap. Make sure
sure.
you're very honest about the gaps because if you're transparent, that's going to be a customer for life, right?
Right.
So,
And one of
awesome.
the ways that candidates, if there's any candidates, I don't know if there would be any candidates listening, but also as founders, what you can do to ensure that they have a really robust understanding of your personality and your leadership style is to actually pair them with people that you've managed in the past just to have a
Mm,
call with. Maybe not an
totally.
interview, but maybe it's not at your current company, but a company you worked at in the past that you manage someone or someone you're super close with or an advisor or someone that you've worked really closely with. Maybe you pair them up for just 15 minutes where the candidate can just simply ask them questions about working with you to see if there's matches. Like, I
Totally.
think in this day and age, a lot of hiring managers are back channeling candidates, which is great.
Yeah.
Like, everybody's, some people like back channeling, some people don't. I think it's a
Yeah.
great way to get some information, but you can't be upset if the candidate's also back channeling
Sure.
you, right? Like, and if
Yeah.
someone was back channeling me, I'd be like, great, please do back channel me because you want to be able to get a really robust understanding. Now, you want to be able to back channel through multiple people because you could just have one person that had a bad experience with that person. But maybe you go ahead and you actually give them the options. Hey, here's 6 people I've managed. Would you want to talk with any of them and see if they would be
Yeah.
open?
I love that. Yeah, that reverse reference is super important.
Yeah,
I realize there's one thing about the process I didn't ask you.
sure.
I'm sure you remember, but with the Twingate hiring process, I had candidates pitch us our product, right?
Oh, yes, I remember.
I gave them like, what is it, like 3 or 4 days to get a quick
Yes,
download. We had this
yes,
doc where I sent them like documentation, some
right.
videos. I had a video of me pitching the product, which a lot of candidates listen to and watch. But what do you think about that process? For me, it gave me a lot of great signals,
Sure.
but I do every now and then get pushback from founders. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on
Yep.
that part of the process and what that felt like for you, and hearing from candidates who are going through it for our hiring process.
Well, I think the root of this, no matter what assignment that you do, is would you buy from this person, right? And
Yeah.
if you need to ask yourself that before you hire this person, would me, myself, buy from this person? If the answer is maybe or no, then you should not be hiring from this person, right?
Yep.
But also, if you are coming from a technical background, then maybe you ask someone else, would you buy from this person, right?
Mhm.
So, like, maybe it's you, or maybe it's someone else that's coming from a revenue background, like, hey, would you buy from this person? So, I think one, just to get that out of the way, I think that's super
Yeah.
important.
That is
Two,
like
for the
the
assignment,
TLDR goal. Yeah, exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
For the assignment, everybody should have an assignment in their interview process. If you don't, you are increasing the chances that you're being sold by an account executive. You have to remember these people, these account executives are in this role for a reason. They're really, really, really good at selling. So they're going to be
Yep.
able to sell you as well. So you need to be able to put their money where the mouth is and be able to have an assignment. Now, there's a lot of talk these days, which I totally understand about like free work, right? Like, and that's something you really want to stay away from, right? Don't ask someone to be able to pull together 50 target companies that could be a good fit for you. Like, that's just free work, and you're going to lose someone and you're going to create a really bad name for yourself in the market. However, for Twin Gates, it was pitch me Twin Gate. A lot of other companies that I see, it's pitch me a company that you feel really familiar with or one of your products that you've sold in the past. Either of those is fine. I think the cutoff for pitch me my company is the technicality of it, right?
Mm,
If you're setting them up not for success, then like, or setting them up to fail, then don't have them pitch your company. They're going to be a little bit uncomfortable. They're not going to know. Like, you could potentially see how much research they've done. So I think
yeah.
that's the pro of it. But I think the technicality is really important. And if it's a really complex, like, product to understand, like, just save the time and have them pitch something that they feel really comfortable with, because you get to see them in their moment, with something that they're really, really passionate about or something that they've been selling for the past couple of years, right? If they
Yep.
botch that, then you know for sure, like, this is not someone I want to bring on because you've been selling this for 3 years and then you get on this assignment and you can't sell it to me. So I think at the
Totally.
end of the day, I'm open to whatever type of assignment it is. I think if it's an AE, you need them to be presenting a demo or a qualification call to you. That's really important because I've seen a lot of hiring managers that have an assignment that's just almost similar to a BDR assignment where it's like pull a
Mhm.
couple companies and write some emails out. Like, no, like you're these people are going to be selling on the phone, like on Zoom, like
Yes.
have them practice that. So there needs to be an assignment portion. But you can do either sell me your company, and there should be a prompt with it. If you're going to ask them to sell you your own company, then what you did, you need to be providing a lot of articles. You need to be providing a video of your own self doing it. That's amazing. A demo, then they'll have enough stuff to really work off of. But there needs to be
Yeah.
some assignment portion of it for sure. And I would say if you're coming from a technical background, loop someone in that understands the revenue side of the business, whether it's an advisor or maybe someone not even in your company, so you can get multiple opinions, right? Because
Yeah.
you could be on and be like, this person was amazing, but then there's no one else there to really judge it as well. So I think that's important to have multiple people listening to it, or you can send the recording, to someone and they could give you feedback.
Yeah, and I think the thing I like about having multiple people is a lot of these founders are selling into enterprise organizations. So the
Sure.
norm is going to be having 3 or 4 stakeholders on the call. So
Yeah.
that's also something we used to see is like, okay, if I'm CISO and my director was CIO, is the prospect or the candidate, I should say, engaging both of us, right? That's
Sure.
also a skill that we look
Absolutely.
for and filter for. And then
Yeah.
the thing that I like too is throwing curveball questions on purpose and seeing how
Sure.
folks react because
Absolutely.
honestly, like even 6, 7, 8, 9 months into me being at Twingate, I didn't know answers to certain questions, right?
Hmm.
And making up the answer sets you up for failure, but
Sure.
how you handle that and follow up and deal with that in the moment was also a big indicator of whether or not somebody was ready for enterprise sales, in my opinion. So
Right.
thanks
Yeah.
for weighing in on that.
Sure.
Let's shift gears a little bit to bets
Sure.
because when you approached me when I was at Twingate, I forget if we started working before Twingate, we might have known each other, but I
I
think
think
what
we
really
started working at Twingate through your VC at the time because they were working with us. So that's how we got connected, I
yes, that's right,
think.
that's right, through
Yes.
Signal
Yeah.
Fire, that's
Yeah.
right.
Through Single Fire.
Um,
Exactly.
so I think what was really compelling and what really worked well for me was the Bets Connect platform.
Oh, sure.
Obviously, Bets also has a services component. So can you just talk to me about, that decision to bring in kind of a platform model and how that's been going for
Yeah.
our founders? Yeah, because I
Yeah.
think it'd be relevant
Absolutely.
for a lot of our founders as they grow their teams.
Sure. So for those that don't know, Bets is specifically segmented within the go-to-market space. So all of the searches that we do are in go-to-market with a really, really big emphasis in sales. That is our bread and butter. Founding sales hires being a huge portion of our business as well. We started off as an agency where we were just contingency for the longest time. And then about 5 years ago, we created our own software platform. So now we offer two sides of our business, traditional contingency agency and also a subscription-based service. And the reason we created a subscription-based service, a really good example was Peter at Twingate, was that they needed a resource to be able to scale, but scaling became very expensive when you're just using an agency to go from like 3 sales reps to 10 sales reps, right? If you're just hiring one hire, it probably makes sense to use a contingency agency. Fees at all agencies range between like 20 to 30% of the candidate's base
Mhm.
salary. I think that is money well spent with a first sales hire. But when you're looking to hire more than 2 hires, that's really where a subscription comes into play. And that's something that Bets created in the market. And so we offer a basically all you can eat package where you pay one upfront price and then you can hire unlimited sales talent for the rest of the year, which has been really helpful for companies to be able to decrease the costs that they're spending in hiring, but also get the most out of it, right? When you're paying 30K for each AE that you're bringing on, then you might not bring on the same amount, or you might be extra specific on what you're bringing on, right? Knowing that you kind of have this subscription-based model has been really helpful for people. So it's just a different way to hire that we've introduced. And then also we have a pretty large network that Peter was great, had great user adoption with, to be able to tap into as well. So we've been around for about 16 years. We created a sales network just under about 1 million candidates.
Oh,
And so
wow.
a lot of them being super, super active in the market. And so we have a network that when you partner with us, you actually get to tap into as well. So we will, give you all the hands-on service of finding candidates for you, screening them and sending them over to you. But you can also look in our network. And if there's anybody that looks good, you can actually reach out to them as well.
Yes, I love that like self-service component. It's like LinkedIn just for people who are looking for jobs, right? So,
Exactly.
awesome. Thanks for explaining that.
Sure.
Before we go into, so there's this compensation calculator that I'm really
Yeah.
curious about seeing that you all have
Sure.
created.
Yeah.
But before that, let's talk. I mean, everybody's talking about AI. So
Yeah.
I am curious, like, how are you all using AI within your business? With
Yeah.
recruiting, like, is that coming into play right now already? Are there components of that within the Connect platform? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, tell me about that.
So AI in recruiting is something that's been picking up a lot. We
Mhm.
have our own version of AI in our software for a matching purposes. So to be able to match like companies with candidates.
Cool.
But we've been able to really adopt AI just in our recruiting strategy as well. I think there's still a lot more that we can do, but some of the biggest ways that we've utilized AI is just research building. So kind of what I mentioned at the beginning of having a list of people in your space that might have similar sales motions, ChatGPT can do a lot of that, right? So,
Mhm.
that's where we've been able to pull. You could type into ChatGPT, find me 30 companies that, are in this similar size with headquarters in San Francisco that, sell into brands and what they do, and they'll give you a list, right? So that's something that we've been
Yeah,
using really well for market mapping to have an understanding of who are the other competitors in this space. But
cool.
recently, I've actually been playing around, and we actually partner with one company now that has been using AI to just find candidates a lot faster versus like a traditional LinkedIn recruiter. So there's a lot of those tools out there that have been helpful. They're still new, so there's still like some bugs in them, but still I was able to find some good candidates. And then where AI has also stepped in a lot on is the screening process. So now there's AI tools that will screen a candidate for you up front and take notes for you. If you don't have a lot of
Cool.
time, there's AI that will dictate all of the call recording notes and be able to tell you if there's like bias in the interview process, which I
Oh,
think is really
interesting.
great. So there's a
Okay.
lot of really cool recruiting tools out there. I would say a lot of those are for probably teams that have built out talent teams already, but I definitely think founders can use some of these tools to have a better understanding of like how robust their hiring process is.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. Okay, wow, that's a lot. That's cool. I mean, we
Yeah.
have Gong in sales was such a like ubiquitous thing. Now call
Right.
recording is just what you do.
Yeah.
But I never really thought about that for interviews as well, right? To pick up
Well,
things like bias. That would be super helpful for a lot of
and
hiring managers who sometimes don't know what to ask or are asking inappropriate questions to, which I'm sure you,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it's really important. This was a topic I wanted to just touch on briefly is really picking who's in your interview process the right way, right? So you want to make sure that you have people that are going to be representing your brand in the best way possible. If you're coming from a 5-person startup, you might not have a lot of people that you can really pull into the interview process. Pull an
Yeah.
advisor in, right? Pull you, like pull someone from your VC team, like you can pull other people in, but it's really important that you're pulling the right people in. And it's most important is that you are all under the same understanding for what you're looking for. Because a lot of times people have different understandings of what they think they're hiring for. The CEO thinks they're hiring for one thing, the VP of product really wants to see something else. The CS leader wants this, or maybe there's not a VP of product and it's, advisor thinks that this is really important. You all have to be on the same page because so many times I've seen hiring managers be so excited about a candidate just for
Yeah.
someone else in the interview process to shoot them down and say, hey, I'm not interested in this candidate. And then they're like, oh, well, I have to reject because I really, really care about this person's opinion. Like, be okay still hiring someone, even though someone in your process has said no to them, if you all are under the same understanding of what they're looking for, right? And
Yeah.
that's where the recordings of calls really comes into play
Mm.
because you can look back and listen to that call and say, hey, like, are your comments,
Mm.
correct in the sense that are we looking for the same thing or were you looking for something different and that's why you rejected them?
Very cool. That's awesome. I mean, speaking of like a fair and equitable interview process, as you know, I do a lot of writing about just Asian Americans and tech
Sure.
sales and kind of my own
Yeah.
experience growing up and in a
Yeah.
world that was heavily like white male dominant.
Sure.
What are you seeing? Are you seeing things change, hopefully for the better? Or, I'm sure there's still challenges in terms of getting
Sure.
diversity
Yeah.
as kind of a marker of, some of these hiring processes. So yeah, can you talk a little bit about that in terms of
Yeah.
what you've seen, how it's evolving, where there's still challenges?
So I think there's There's actually a lot of tools nowadays that can, and AI that can help you, when you're in a sourcing strategy. One of the things that we have that I really love is called anti-bias mode on our sourcing tool, where you can actually press a button. I don't know if you ever used it, but you could press a button and it actually takes off everybody's names and faces. So you're really only looking at their
Wow.
profile when you're sourcing for them, which I think is really great. And I think when we ran the stats, it increased diversity up to like 15% in sourcing.
Wow. I think I
Um,
remember talking to a product manager about this because I remember
yeah,
telling you and the team I want to hire more like diversity for more
sure.
diversity in women,
Right.
right? So
Well, I
yeah,
also think it's important at if especially if, depending on what diversity looks like to you, like
yeah.
that's where a partner really comes into play, because the hardest thing right now is finding women in sales. Like that's almost
Yes.
impossible to find right
Yeah.
now. And then you add all the other things that you need on top in your first sales hire, is it can be really difficult. So you really need to be working with someone that has done that before, that understands the importance of that, and that has a network, right? Has a network, is connected to the right people that can help you find that. But I think that's so, so important as well. And there are, partners and tools that can help you do that. But, it's also something that you have to also be aligned. Your entire hiring team needs to be aligned on as well.
Yeah, you have to be intentional about it. Awesome.
Sure.
Well, thanks, Lamar. This has been amazing. Before I
Yeah.
wrap it up, can you show us this new shiny
Sure.
compensation tool that you're talking about that's self-serve? Why don't
Yes.
you set it up and show us a little bit of what it looks like, and I'll give you share screen permissions as
Awesome.
well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm super excited. We just launched a new product called Comp Engine. And this is actually a compensation tool that everybody will have access to. So it is a free tool that you can log in and start to have or put in your filters to be able to have an understanding of what are market rates for those specific roles. So I'll share my screen and walk you through some of the different things that you can do here.
Amazing.
But we're super excited about it, and I need to be able to share. So let me. Okay. So this is what Comp Engine looks like. Can you see this?
I can. Yep. Yep.
Awesome. And so there's a couple things you're seeing on this slide. First thing is you're going to put all your filters in on the left side here, and it's going to give you recommendations for what we think you should pay that person based on our own roles that we've worked on. So that's really important, based on data that we've seen across the past 6 months in our own portfolio. And so you can put here what type of role you're looking for. So we have all the different go-to-market roles that you can see here:
Wow.
sales, customer success, and marketing. For this, I just put an enterprise AE. You can specifically put how many years of experience they're coming with, right? So 5 to 10 I have right now. You could put in
Mhm.
location. So let's say we wanted to do New York, you could do. You could also do time zone. So if you want someone like on the East Coast, you could do that.
Very
And then
cool.
vertical industries, which is really cool. So this is something where you can actually say, I want them to come from this type of software, right? I want them to come from software. I want them to come from DevOps. I want them to come from enterprise. I want them to come from mobile payments. Like there's a long, long
Wow.
list of different verticals that you can choose from. And then something that I think would be great for your team is funding round. You can actually say specifically in their funding round what would be, what would be the compensation for that. Um,
Wow.
and then what you can see here, which is my favorite, is how likely or how fast would you be able to hire that person based on that salary, right? So you'd be able
Hmm.
to see a base salary, a variable, an on-target earning structure, and then you'd be able to see the time to hire. So how long would it take you to hire that person if you're in the 10th percentile, right? Okay, so
Mm.
if you're not paying market rate, it's probably going to take you over a month to hire someone, versus if you're in a very competitive bracket, you'd be able to hire that person in about 31 days.
That's
Um,
really cool because I get a lot of like, how long should I take to hire somebody, or how long is it going to take, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
This
I think
puts
that's
data
rule of
behind
thumb.
it.
And this is also time to hire like in the market, and also working with a good partner, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see the percentile, which is great. And then you can also see base and variable split, and what equity would look like as well, for at that stage. So it's something that we just launched. We're still kind of working out some kinks, but I think it's really, really useful. And it's something that we use in all of our searches to be able to show our hiring
Wow.
managers, what's the time to hire, but also what is the candidate pool, right? Because you can add some filters on here and the candidate pool goes really low. So then like, hey, how likely is it that I'm going to be able to find this person?
Very cool. I love this. And yeah, Lamar was saying before the recording that this is in beta right now, but for anybody who wants access, you can ask me directly within the community and she's happy
Yeah,
to give you access. Uh,
exactly.
this is really cool. This is everything that I would have wanted because I used to send the PDF compensation guide that you guys
Right.
had, which was also super helpful.
Yeah.
But this is like that on steroids, which is amazing.
It's real time, which is great. And it
Yeah,
changes with the market because we usually put our comp guides like once or twice a year. So now
right.
it like refreshes really every time that there's a new search and if any changes in the market happen.
Amazing. Well, Lamar, this has been awesome. We covered so many topics. You're a
Yeah,
wealth of knowledge. Clearly you've been doing this for a long time, and I'm
sure.
glad we're going to be able to share this with the founders. Any kind of final thoughts or words of wisdom on hiring for these early stage CEOs you can think about? If
I
not,
think
it's okay. You dropped so many golden nuggets, but
I think being super organized and thoughtful about your process, really, right, really doing research before you go to market on exactly what you're looking for and ask other people, right? Use your network to have an understanding of really what are we looking for. And then also some of the mistakes that I've seen that is always a big piece of advice is don't be too picky, right? Like you want to be
hmm,
intentional, but I've seen a lot of founders look to hire the first 6 sales reps to all be unicorns. Like you're going to have massive open seat costs when you can't find that person. And it takes you a year to find one person when
yeah.
you're too specific. So I think with the first sales hire, be as specific as you want. But as you start to scale from there, you got to lighten it up a little bit, or you're not going to be able to scale in time to really be able to match all of your goals.
Yeah, it's not a perfect science, and unfortunately, you are going to have to let go of some people too, but
Sure.
that's part of learning in the hiring process too. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, awesome. Lamar, well, thanks so much. This is amazing. Really
Sure.
appreciate all that you're doing. And yeah, hopefully I'll be able to send some founders your way.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, we will talk to you
Cool.
later. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.